finally, it's PTSD Compass Summit, and we are here with Richard Morden, Nancy Nance, Linda Hayes, and Erin Chandler. So be with us. See, we're going to talk about nice and amazing topics. Hello, everyone. Another day, beautiful. Here we have rain in Toronto, and but we are very exciting because we're gonna launch our book soon. And today we're gonna talk about grief recovery for the first day of Summit, PTSD Compass Summit. So we go through everybody and introduce ourselves. First, I'm Panta Kalhorp, a publisher, 3 times bestseller author, and fertility coach, PTSD coach. And then we have Erin Chandler. She also helped me with the book. She has a 4 award on the book. Thank you so much for her. Can you please introduce yourself, Erin?
Hi, Panta. Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. The book, very, very exciting. I think it's going to help a lot of people to have all those different modalities and access to it. So my name is Erin Chandler, and I am a psychic medium, an intuitive guide and healer. And I work with the bereaved, and I also teach other healers and intuitives how to open up their connection to the divine.
Thank you so much, Erin. Now we go to Richard Morden. Just some introduction about him. He is also an author of PTSD Compass, and she has a separate chapter on this book. Thank you so much for your help, Richard. And I really wish to know about you and what did you write there. But first, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Pentia. It's a pleasure to be here. Richard Morden. I'm an EFT practitioner, otherwise known as tapping. So it's kind of my foundation work. I have other modalities I add into. Again, trying to remember what I even wrote for the chapter as far as the healing part, but just, grounding, calming the nervous system. I really like working with the vagus nerve system because I think it's primary to our health, and I think it's key. So that's what I work with clients, to teaching them how to regulate, and because it's forgotten. It's the primary communication connection in our system. So there's various ways we can work with that. So
thank you, Richard. Now we go to Nancy Nance, recovery coach, and she's also another author of PTSD Compass. She wrote a very beautiful chapter there. I was almost crying. So you're going to see it very soon. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. Writing for me has been a beautiful process, and I don't know how to even describe the writer's journey and how it's helped me with grief, other than it really helped me understand what it was that I lost. For me, that was joy, and it wasn't just the name joy, it was the feeling joy. And to realize that that wasn't something that I ever really had, because as we go through the different layers of healing, we tap into our emotions. As a recovery coach, I help people understand what emotions are. It's a beautiful place to be when you can feel once again after grief.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Now we have Linda Hayes. She's also early parenting therapist, PTSD Compass author. She's a hypnotherapist, NLP coach. She has lots on her talents, and she has a lot of stories, nice stories to tell. I love her chapter. Very emotional, very touching. And I'm so happy I had this opportunity to work with her. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you, Pentia. It's always a pleasure being with you. My background is midwifery, lactation, and early parenting. coaching and clinical psychologist. So I have a few little tools in my toolkit, but one that I find is just so powerful is prenatal bonding. And prenatal bonding BA is a particular a technique that I had the privilege of going through myself as I'm training up in it at the moment. And it's a preventative measure, and it just helps release so much untrapped or trapped, I should say, grief or unresolved grief and loss. Very, very powerful. Is with new parents, expected parents, and looking at mental health of the infant as well as the parents. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Linda. So actually, today is not only about the book. We're gonna talk about different areas of PTSD, especially grief recovery, and people who already been there and who already recover from PTSD. When you lose somebody, especially when she or he is a part of you and part of your life, is not easy to forget. She's gonna be there forever in your heart. But that's the point. How can we continue after losing her, and how can we cope with the new situation? Because that's a new situation. We have to live without what we already be dependent on it, like a child or a wife or somebody who always be part of our life. So now we're gonna start with Erin. This summit, before that, I tell you, is a bit different from what we had before, because my aim is not only talking about this grief. We're going to talk about solution in our book as well, how these people could overcome their grief. And you're going to learn these steps and how you can have more hope to your life. Thank you, Erin. Can you start with your journey a little bit and give us some tips of recovery?
Absolutely. So my journey began with the death of my youngest daughter, Ava, back in 2010. And through that process of grief, it became very, very obvious that our traditional systems and our traditional ways of dealing, or rather not dealing, with grief in society really didn't work for me, to the point where I became suicidal, and all of my relationships and surroundings and things that were supposed to support me ended up not being the support that I needed. So I became suicidal. And through that process, I said to God, I give up, and I'm going to make a plan to end my life, because I had lost all hope. I had lost all joy. I had lost the ability to feel, because I was consistently in that PTSD, emotional, physical, mental response all the time, thinking my other children are going to die. So for me, because I never was able to move through that, that was the end result. That darkness really takes away your desire to live, your joy to live. And grief can really do that when you don't have an outlet, or you don't have an avenue to properly express it, move through it, or to heal it. So through that process, here I am deciding to end my life. And when I finally made that decision that I was going to make a plan, a woman showed up a couple of days later and sent me a message saying, your daughter, Ava, who is my youngest daughter who passed away, has been coming to me crying. So this woman was a medium, but a closet medium. Nobody knew that she was a medium. So that, to be able to be heard, to know that I'm talking to the universe, God, spirit, creator, whatever you wish to call it, and to have somebody else show up and say, hey, they heard you. Your daughter heard you. She's not gone. I don't know that there's any hope greater than that. So for me, through the grief journey, once that happened, I was able to pick myself up and start to get the help that I needed. I learned to communicate with my daughter. So I went through the actual process of going through grief with my daughter in spirit, in full communication. So instead of grieving for her, I ended up grieving with her. And that has been tremendously powerful for me, myself, and for all of the people that I work with, because it's a process they go through as well. You get to have all the conversations you never had. And at the end of the day, when we say grief recovery and you never get over it, perhaps we're not supposed to be getting over it. We're supposed to be integrating that. The people that we love are a piece of us. Just because their body has passed on, crossed over, doesn't mean that we've lost that piece of them. So oftentimes in grief, I find the most powerful transformation for people in grief is when that gets integrated and becomes not only a piece of them, but opens them up to a whole new world and getting back their joy and following a new path and seeing deeper and further than they did before. So for me, and for the people that I have worked with, and a lot of people will say the same thing, to honor and express your journey through grief in a safe community is perhaps the most powerful. And then when you add in the fact that you can communicate with all those who have passed on, there are no more conversations that are undone, and you feel tremendously safe. And those repercussions of PTSD and grief that a lot of people have end up subsiding or being pulled out to be healed or understood on a deeper level, or going back to something that it's related to that's been a pattern through their life. Those things come up to be healed in grief. Grief is probably one of the most powerful catalysts for a human being to come back into themselves and to open up on a greater expanse of life. So for most people, when we say, I've lost my child, yes, it was a life-shattering experience, and it destroyed everything I thought that was true. It's destroyed all my safety, all of those things. But looking back on it now, going through this process and doing this process with other people and recognizing that there is life after death and the universe sees all of us, has actually been one of the greatest gifts, not just for me, but for other people who receive that gift as well. It's been extremely powerful, and I'm
Thank
very
you.
grateful for this journey.
Wow, that was beautiful. And as I said, I love her chapter. And, you know, PTSD is not recognized for many people. You may have it for years and you don't know what is this. I didn't know the meaning of PTSD. As soon as I started writing my book, through journaling, I healed myself and I try to cope with what happened to me. For my audience right now, I've been through few traumas in my life. The first trauma I had was somebody tried to kill me with a knife point, and that trauma was with me for a long time. And I was in a point that I have to process it, and I have to sit with myself, how to confront this, how to recover from triggers. And now, after recovering, I thought it's finished, but then I had my asthma, because we're gonna go through it in mind body connection. Everything is connected. Your spirit, your mind, and body are all connected to each other. So if something happened to you in a very shocking level, something you lose, or if somebody gonna kill you, all of them gonna store somewhere in your body. So as soon as you don't confront this, you still gonna have it, and someday in your life you may end up having a cancer or chronic pain. So that's why I try to talk about this in a deeper level, because there are a lot of ways we can still learn how to live with PTSD and how we can recover. Now, after my first trauma that I had few years after I had my infertility journey, and then I had a book about this, naturally conceived, as all of you know. And as Erin said, yes, PTSD happens when you lose your child in miscarriage, or even when you have your infant dying. That's so difficult. So we have Linda also. She can talk about miscarriage and early parenting, because she helps parents in their loss because miscarriage is so hard. I've been there 2 times. It's so painful, and you just feel something is separating from you. Is something is so hard to believe and so hard to cope. But then I realize, if this spirit should be with me, so she should stay there, right? So that's why I always have a lot of question in my mind, how we can cope with miscarriage, and I try to talk about this in my book as well. Linda have her own ways. She has hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and NLP to talk about this. And she has a very nice case study in her book talking about early parenting, and how she actually helped her client or patient to go through her pregnancy, and how, when she had a very bad experience in her first pregnancy, and how she helped her. All right, Linda, thank you for being here. Please talk about what you're doing exactly.
Thank you, Pantea. Erin, I love the fact that you're talking about the connection of this relationship that we have, with what we lose around us and the people that we lose. Not only physically do we lose them, but we lose them on many other levels. And also when we lose emotionally a connection with something that we desire or we love or we anticipated, it takes away a sense of us as well, that sense of self, that we're missing something. And to me, the work I do with families is mainly about preventative. And I love how all these different realms come together when we're looking at hypnotherapy, or maybe CBT, or maybe other healing modalities. Everything comes together as a means of connecting to someone else. And that's just so powerful. I see that as being our goal in preventing as well as curing a lot of the problems that we exist with in our lives. It is the connection and relationships that we have with people that improves our sense of self, our confidence, and heals us in order to move on and keep growing and developing through our lives. So yes, Pantea, one of my mums in particular that I mentioned in the book, she came to me with an issue around being unable to fall pregnant, and what she thought everyone else was just saying, well, you're an issue, there's a problem, and it's all about you. And she didn't think that was the case. However, when she came to see me, it unfolded that she had had 5 years prior to attempting to fall pregnant again, a birth experience that was quite traumatic. And in listening to her story, I was perplexed that she didn't have a physical traumatic event, that scarred her body as such, but it scarred her heart. And in her mind, she lost her sense of self and her confidence in who she was, and the ability to be able to care for a child or bring another baby into the world. And she was suffering from PTSD. So this was 5 years of suffering before she realized. And in going through her story, she stumbled upon, matter of fact, in her view, that, I had to care for my friend's son one day, and he fell over. And in the backyard, I heard this screaming and noticed that he had split his head open. So she had to go into a mode of saving him and helping him, that parent mode again. And with her own son, she was a little bit disconnected and distant, and Dad did a lot more of the work and the care. But she had to fall into this role that she had been avoiding for such a long period of time. And in doing so, she realized that she couldn't actually get to the hospital. While she was in the car, she was so disconnected and disjointed, that and fearful of traveling over the bridge to get to this hospital that she'd been avoiding for 5 years, that she went into a panic attack. And then the PTSD symptoms just resurfaced from that moment onwards, and she'd had difficulty falling pregnant. So in the work that I was looking at joining with her was around NLP, which is looking at the symptoms that are coming up for her in her body, how she perceives these symptoms and these events, and allowing us to bring them to the surface and regulate them in a way that is tolerable for her. And in many ways, that's a little bit like somatic work that we find a lot of people who do trauma therapy work with. So it's moving into the body rather than staying in the head. And what I find with a lot of women, when they're telling stories, they tend to tell the facts. And it's very factual, but not a lot of information around the actual emotion and how they felt in the situation or at the time. So that disconnect from themselves, as we see with PTSD and other traumas and grief especially, is very present in all of us, and especially when we're seeing mums in the early parenting period.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Linda. Yes, actually, you're right. I had this experience with working with homeopath, and I really like what she's doing because she doesn't talk about herbal or this just giving you medication. That's what we expect when we go to doctor or somebody could help us, with fast recovery. But grief is not the fast recovery. It needs some time to recover, and as you said, is very difficult. It's very difficult to uncover our emotion. To me, was so difficult to talk about my deepest emotion with homeopath, even for myself. And then I realized how difficult it is for other people to talk with holistic medicine practitioners, because that's what they do. Is not only with your physical body. We have to go through different layers and go through your spirit and your mind and connect them together. Now we're gonna talk about losing your child again. We go back on somebody else here, who is Nance. She also lost her child she was in 20s, right, Nancy? Yes.
Emily would be 20 now had she stayed on this earth. She was 10 when she passed. So it's been
Oh,
10 years
okay.
since her passing. The way I talk about her is often confusing because I still talk about her as though she is in the present, because she is in the present with me, because like Erin, I talk to her. And because I talk to so many people that have crossed over to a different sound speaker system, and I have the pleasure of hearing them, it's just different for me when I articulate it, because I talk about them as though they are here, because for me they are here. Going back to what Linda said about women and how we talk about the passing in such a disconnected way. I know I spoke like a robot for so long. It was like I could state the time, the date, the details of Emily's death, but I did not have the ability to even tell you what I felt. I had disconnected from my feelings because of past trauma that I didn't even recognize as trauma, because I didn't know that anybody else wasn't living the life that I lived. I thought it was normal to be in the life that I lived. I thought that abuse was something that was normal. I didn't know. And you don't know what you know until you know what you know. And I was blessed with so many people. As I'm looking at the people on the screen in front of all of us, it's as though you were the people who helped me. Someone helped me with Reiki. I didn't know what Reiki was. I had people that helped me go into past lives. I'm like, past what? I didn't know. And because I was so disconnected, I was willing to try anything that would help me. And I think that the more that we open to the possibility of trying something, the more able we are able to heal. And when we can combine the traditional practices of modern medicine with the holistic or the spiritual or the woo woo, whatever we want to call that thing that we haven't yet tried, then we can figure out what it is that can possibly help us through that great awakening into the new life that we have. Because when you do go through grief and you lose a child or you lose a loved one, your life is never the same. It can't be. It simply can't be. So you can't
Interesting.
recreate what was. It's about learning to walk within the void to get to a level of acceptance. And it does take time.
Yeah, it's not one night. Yeah, like everybody say, oh, okay, this happened. Try to be positive. No, it's not gonna happen. You can't be positive when you lose somebody. Like I had I had an aunt, and she was very close to me, and she raised me like with my mother. She was always with us. And when I lost my aunt, I was not recovered. Like it was difficult for me to just say, oh, I'm so positive. I lost her. It took me some time. Still after more than 20 years, still after more than 20, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking that she lives somewhere, and I'm talking to her, every day. I'm still thinking. And it's not something, as you said, you can forget. No, we go to Richard Morden. He's an EFT practitioner, as I said. And again, he has a very special chapter in my book, PTSD Compass. And the real reason I have him here is two things. First of all, we're going to talk about how to cope with losing your wife when you have to raise your other kids, because you are grieving and you don't have enough energy to deal with other stuff, but then you have to be a shelter for your child and other children. So how could you do it, Richard? How, I know it's so difficult. How could you uh, go over it and tell your children that be strong, or what did you do?
Well, Providence too had me that I found EFT, emotional freedom technique, probably 2 months before my wife passed. And I was watching a summit, and I started using it a little bit, and it sounded interesting. No idea what was coming. She went off to work went to a conference, and she blacked out on the way to the conference in the back of the car near London, Ontario, the best brain hospital, and they were all nurses. Got her in there very quickly. And we got a phone call. So literally within 24 hours of me kissing her goodbye to go to work, I was choosing to have her taken off life support because she was declared 90% brain dead. And my children were 17, 18. So all of us sitting around her at the time were her mom and dad, her brother, and myself and our 2 children. And the decision was very quickly for me because, again, there was no hope. And the reason I say that, I had watched my mother suffer with cancer for 12 years into 9 months, her last 9 months in a hospital bed. So I just saw the long-term effects of that cancer breakdown. My brother had committed suicide in 1988. He'd called me before he killed himself, and then the police came to my door, and I identified him. So those were traumas I had no recognition of, especially my brother. I had no recognition of. I was very pragmatic. This is business. And even with my wife, I was very calm about the whole thing. I knew I needed self-care. because I realized who my children were, and I knew on another case where somebody passed and the children had never been allowed to grieve. And so I said, I'm going to use this EFT to help myself. And I took a course. She died in June. I took a course in October, a 3-day course. And I had 2 major traumas come out with my father and my brother, and I had no idea I even existed in my body. And they were obviously affecting me. You know, those invisible barriers we have, that frozen part, those little angry episodes that show up and you don't know why. You know, I went through that stage of uncovering that in my early stages of marriage, and I was able to manage it, but I couldn't figure out why I was so angry when I had so much beauty around me. So I can talk more about that. But so just being present with my primary care so I could be emotionally available to my children. I used a lot of tapping. I took a course in the spring with Nancy Foster, a master coach and psychotherapist. So her training really helped me do my personal peace procedure of my own work and allowed me to be very present. And I stayed home. Like, I worked full time. I was dad. So I really stayed out of relationships. I didn't go into try and replace. I just was honoring myself and my children, and wonderful coffee friends, but it just helped me peel away the layers. And what I found is, because it's a body process, we're accessing the energies in the body. So it kind of bypasses the conscious mind, because the body knows all. You know, it's your unconscious, and it's interesting what comes up when, you know, and the information that comes up when you're tapping. But we go into the pain. You know, we don't work in an affirmation. We go into what you're feeling in the moment. I'd laugh, I'd teach a tap and rant, a Chevy Chase rant, whatever's going on, you tap and just purge it out. But underneath that is your beauty. Underneath your pain and your sorrow and your own sometimes self-disgust and your own self-hatred and all the things that go through, we have one word, and it's called love. At the very core of who we are, we're each in that space. So uncovering that allowed me to have presence, allowed me to, a year after my wife passed, I wrote up my next relationship on a piece of paper, what it felt like. And that began almost 4.5 years later. And that's what I have today here, because I knew what that felt like. And I worked to release the pain, so that feeling was so present to me. So just, again, because of the physical process, you can tap in the worst of times. You can be mad as snot and still doing the tapping. And I'll tell you, the energy will dispel. And it allows you to find that presence. But again, we admit what's going on wrong. And then we build up from there. Because an affirmation, I feel great, when inside you're feeling like the lowest of low. It's so counter to yourself. It's almost insulting. So I find where that pain is. The pain quickly goes because it's a temporary feeling. And then we build the ladder up from there to more of who you are, truly are underneath. I've said one word again. Underneath all of it, we're love.
Beautiful. So, to be honest, that was one of the best book we had, because it's not, as I said, it's not only about the stories. We had solutions there, and I also have a master class out of this book, which is coming up soon, and I'm gonna announce it here. And I just want to ask you this question: how was your feeling when you start journaling and come back to your own grief? Because when you start journaling, you have those memories again. You come back those feeling that you had with your loved one. How does it feel? And then how was your feeling when you see yourself as a published author? I'm gonna start from Linda.
Wow. Seeing myself, I know through journaling, my recent experience with prenatal bonding BA, which was like a tranced state, and going back to my own birth experience, pregnancy and early parenting was so powerful. It brought up so much emotion and pain and anguish and fear. And yet, while I was journaling and writing the events and the feeling and the emotion that came up for me, and all the colors and the images that arose, things started to fall into place for me. And the journaling was so healing. It actually made me make sense of the patterns that I've had throughout my life. from even a previous past life experience of being left alone and buried alive, actually, as a child, as they did, you know, back in the day, to my birth experience of being alone, and then being my marriage breakup 6 years ago, being left alone. These patterns just seem to keep connecting throughout my life. But while I was journaling, it all came to fruition that this is a sequence, and I'm the only one in charge here. Like, I'm writing this, coach. I'm the one who can change what my next steps are going to be in my future. And that was so powerful for me through my journaling.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Nancy?
Wow, journaling. Oh, it's such an amazing experience. And when I think back to when I first started journaling after Emily passed away, it was so difficult to even find the words to describe what was going on. And as that process unwound, and then I went through separation, divorce, death of my granddaughter, and my journaling became exponentially angry, to have a place to be able to be brutally honest with something other than myself, something that wasn't even definable. And then getting a mass of journals that were full of angry thoughts that I didn't have to, but I chose to burn, because I was terribly afraid that if something ever happened, because like we were talking earlier, death doesn't come with a door mark that says it's going to happen. And I wanted to ensure that nobody ever read what I wrote. So I took the process of journaling to the process of burning away that which no longer served me and who I wanted to become, because I did not want to be that reflection. But I had to go through those emotions. And I think that's something that journaling gave me, was the ability to move from vengeance to more of a just way of being, a just for today presence, where I could begin to love life. Well, like life first, then love life. We go through different stages, right? Let's be honest. When you're going through grief, even saying that you like the day is a challenge. So journaling is one of my absolute favorite things to do.
Thanks. Actually, journaling for me was a healer. It really saved my life, because I just started going through all the details that I had in my PTSD and try to uncover what was my emotion there. Because if you don't work with yourself, nobody can. And the moment you realize you need help, that takes time, because in the beginning you don't want to talk to anybody, just want to be alone, you just want to be numb, but I was in that point that I could start expressing my emotion and releasing everything was inside me, deep inside. And yeah, that was really great challenge for me as well. What about Erin, Chandler?
Yes, journaling. So I do have to say, because I've published 2 books already, I am a published author. One is my daughter's story, and the other one is the actual step-by-step guide on how to open up your connection with your loved ones. So the process of writing books and journaling is cathartic, but I believe that it serves on a different level, because what happens when we have our experiences, that PTSD is a rerun of that experience that is hard to face, like a layer of energy, I guess you could say. So when we go through the process of journaling, we're actually validating our own experience, the shame, the guilt, the disgust, the things we don't want to acknowledge that exist within us. that 9 times out of 10 we would never say to another human being. So the process of validating it ourselves in journaling, especially for me, when everyone outside me said, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, but I did feel that way. So to have a process of journaling validates all of those pieces within you. And the reason why journaling is so effective is not only are you validating it, it's your expression of your experience. And if you feel it, there's a reason. It's valid. It's real that we have those feelings for a reason. The more we express them, the more knowledge comes to us, the more we're able to put the pieces together. We're literally emptying out our energetic vessel as we journal, because it's both a physical, it's also a mental, and it's an emotional. So when you tie the 3 together, for me, that's what made journaling so powerful. It's a cathartic process, and there's nobody to say, hey, you can't feel like that except for you. And I agree, Nancy, you do have to be brutally honest, because it's your truth. And if you deny a piece of your truth, you're really denying your experience and your healing. So journaling, 100%. That's definitely one of the things I have everyone I work with do, and tremendously helped me as well.
Yes, thank you. What about Richard?
I think putting this on paper, obviously, you start to connect the dots because your story is somewhat disjointed, but this allows you to put the lineage together. And I agree with Erin totally on the sense of writing down your thoughts. And for me, it's speaking and the tapping part, because that's honoring you. You know, we're told in society, just get over it, time heals all. 2 big falsehoods, 2 total lies to our system, because it just gets buried in that compression of inner trauma we can't resolve. So journaling in the sense of saying whatever's there, lightning's not going to strike you down. You know, it's your truth. And even if there's a truth about yourself in the moment, I hate myself. Absolutely. You know, in those times, I hate, how this feels. I mean, or you can hate everybody around you. That's just in the moment. But it's honoring you, because then your system, this is I call it congruency, starts to say, finally, you're recognizing me. Finally, you're listening to me. Thank you for that. And that's where I tell people, this is where we start to trust ourselves, because we start to get those feelings back in our body. We run around out there, we don't know what's right, what's wrong, we're just on autopilot. So that whole thing of connecting, it helps you connect and, into your core of who you are.
So Richard, this is your first book, right?
Yes. Another one on the go, but yes.
Yes, great. Is a good feeling when you see yourself as a published author. I can remember myself for my first book, Rules of Change for the Better, and then I had my personal stories there, and I was saying, oh, somebody should read it to see what's happening there. And you really see that your experience may really explain so many things for so many people, because you see similarities and you just think, oh, this person done these solutions, and she actually go through everything that I've been there. So it's really helpful. I really recommend everybody who like to do journaling. It's good for 2 things. First of all, if you want to go through your healing, start journaling, because then you're going to be close to yourself and you can share your stories with others. So these are 2 good things about journaling: healing, recovery, and sharing for others to see what you've been through and how you recover from it. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. I just want to announce tomorrow's topic. We're going to talk about mind-body connection. And again, we have amazing guests there and beautiful speakers who already talk about their experience inside the book. And if you want to get my book, PTSD Compass book, you can actually go through Amazon and get it. I have a very special promotion on October 29. If you want to purchase it, please go and order it on October 29. Thank you so much, and I see you tomorrow. Please subscribe to Pantal Calhoun Transition channel to get the latest interviews and order my book PTSD Compass through Amazon. How to confront PTSD and navigate trauma to